The evening was charged with anticipation. It wasn't just another political debate on national television, it was a face-off that had been simmering for months. The White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, known for her sharp intellect and fearless defense of President Donald Trump's administration, had agreed to appear on America Now, a primetime political panel watched by millions. But what made this appearance special was her scheduled opponent, Jasmine Crockett, the fiery Democratic congresswoman from Texas's 30th district, known for her viral takedowns and bold opposition to Trump-era policies. The media had already dubbed it the Clash of the Titans, a political spectacle guaranteed to set social media ablaze. What no one knew, however, was that Karoline wasn't coming just to debate. She was coming to expose. The opening moments of the show started like any other high-stakes political discussion. The host, veteran anchor Gretchen Lawson, greeted viewers with her usual charm, clearly aware that the ratings tonight were going to break records. The camera panned to the left where Jasmine Crockett, dressed in a vibrant blue blazer and confidently seated, nodded at the introduction. Across from her, Karoline Leavitt sat poised, wearing a sharp white suit and that unmistakable look of resolve she'd become famous for during White House briefings. Tonight, Gretchen began, we're diving into federal funding controversies, alleged misuse of campaign resources, and the transparency, or lack thereof, within government initiatives. The conversation began with predictable tension. Crockett criticized the Trump administration's reallocation of infrastructure funds, claiming they disproportionately hurt minority communities in urban areas. Karoline, cool as ever, responded with well-rehearsed data showing the opposite, that the administration had actually increased investment in underserved areas, including in Crockett's own district. But that wasn't the bombshell. Karoline was waiting. Then, midway through the show, Gretchen turned to the next segment, campaign corruption claims, fact or fiction? That's when Karoline leaned forward, her tone sharpening like a dagger. Gretchen, she said, we've heard enough partisan spin tonight. But what the American people deserve is the truth, and they're going to get it now. Jasmine tilted her head, visibly confused but still smirking. Oh, please, she said, don't tell me you're going to lecture me about ethics. Karoline pulled a file from under her chair and laid it on the desk. Then another. Then another. These, she said, are verified documents reviewed and authenticated by federal investigators. They show a clear trail of misuse of campaign donations funneled through shell consulting firms that trace back to a company, Blue Wave Strategies LLC, which, by the way, is registered under your former chief of staff's name. Jasmine blinked. Gretchen turned pale. The studio went quiet. Karoline continued, in these documents are records of expenditures marked as community outreach events that, according to eyewitnesses and receipts, never occurred. Instead, the funds went toward luxury hotel bookings, designer clothing, and high-end salon visits. And here's the kicker, some of the charges were made on a campaign card during your so-called policy tour in Miami, but you were actually at a resort in the Bahamas. Jasmine sat back, eyes narrowed. This is slander, Karoline cut in, not missing a beat. No, ma'am. This is evidence. And here's the footage to match it. With a nod, the production crew played a short clip of surveillance video from a beachfront resort, clearly showing Jasmine Crockett with two associates laughing over cocktails. On a date that coincided with her publicly posted schedule showing she was at a veterans roundtable in Dallas. The reaction in the studio was thunderous, gasps, murmurs, and even Gretchen stumbling over her words. Jasmine, usually unflappable, looked as if she'd seen a ghost. I have no idea what this is, she said, trying to maintain composure, but I can promise you it's taken out of context. Karoline leaned in, her voice calm but cold. There's no context in which lying to your constituents, misusing donor money, and falsifying your calendar is acceptable. You demanded transparency from this administration, well, I'm demanding it from you. And for the first time all night, Jasmine Crockett had nothing to say. The second the segment ended, hashtag Karoline Leavitt and hashtag Jasmine Crockett started trending on every platform. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok were flooded with clips, memes, and reactions. Political influencers, journalists, and ordinary Americans had the same response. What just happened? The studio remained tense during the commercial break. Jasmine, still visibly shaken, pulled out her phone and whispered to her aide. Karoline didn't move, she sat composed, unbothered, sipping from her water bottle like she'd just finished a regular press briefing. Back on air, Gretchen tried to regain control of the conversation. We're back with our special broadcast, she said, her voice slightly trembling. Things got a bit intense during the last segment, and I want to remind everyone to keep this respectful. Congresswoman Crockett, would you like to respond? Jasmine inhaled deeply, regaining some of her bravado. Look, let's be real. What Karoline just pulled is nothing more than a coordinated smear campaign. This administration is desperate to distract from the real issues: healthcare, education, and racial injustice. Karoline raised an eyebrow. So you're saying the video evidence, the expense reports, the dates, the timestamps, all fake? I'm saying you're twisting facts, Jasmine snapped. This is MAGA propaganda. Karoline smiled slightly. You keep using that word. But what the American people are watching right now isn't propaganda. It's accountability. Something they've been begging for. Gretchen interjected, clearly sensing the need to redirect. Let's go to our legal analyst, Ben Ralston, for a breakdown of what we just heard. Ben, a seasoned analyst and no friend of the Trump administration, appeared on a split screen. Well, he said, adjusting his glasses, if the documents Karoline presented are indeed authenticated, and I have no reason to doubt their legitimacy given the timestamps and match with public schedules, then we could be looking at violations of federal election law. Specifically, misuse of campaign funds, false financial disclosures, and potentially wire fraud if funds crossed state lines under fraudulent pretenses. The audience in the studio gasped again. Jasmine's face tightened. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She didn't lean in for a cheap shot. She simply nodded and said, exactly. Later that night, while the nation debated over what they had just witnessed, something even bigger began to unfold. Karoline's team released a full report, a 17-page PDF titled Broken Promises, an Audit of Representative Jasmine Crockett's Campaign Spending. It detailed every transaction, timestamped with dates and locations, complete with screenshots of public records and financial statements. Some of the highlights: over $42,000 marked as community programs redirected to a single DC-based consulting firm with zero trackable outreach efforts. A series of 5-star hotel stays during campaign events that were never publicized. Payments made to an event planner who, according to her LinkedIn profile, specialized in luxury weddings, not political organizing. The report had already been shared by multiple prominent conservative outlets, and even a few moderate liberal journalists admitted, albeit hesitantly, that the evidence was damning. Back on Capitol Hill, staffers and fellow members of Congress were buzzing. One anonymous representative was quoted by a political insider blog saying, "I don't know what Crockett was thinking going up against Leavitt on live TV like that. Karoline doesn't play games, and she had the receipts." Literally. But Karoline's mission wasn't just to score points on television. Back at the White House that night, she met briefly with President Trump. "Sir," she said, handing him the compiled report, "the American people needed to see this. They needed to see what we're up against. Corruption isn't just in the swamp, it's walking the halls of Congress." Trump gave her a nod of approval, flipping through the report. "You did good, Karoline. This is why I hired you. Keep the fire going." She smiled. "Always." Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett went dark on social media. No tweets. No videos. No public appearances. Her team released a statement vaguely referring to politically motivated attacks and doctored materials, but the damage had already been done. The storm had just begun. The next morning, Washington, D.C. was practically buzzing out of its suit seams. Every coffee shop near Capitol Hill was filled with aides, interns, and political operatives replaying the clip of Karoline Leavitt dismantling Jasmine Crockett on national TV. One moment stood out in every discussion. There's no context in which lying to your constituents, misusing donor money, and falsifying your calendar is acceptable. Karoline Leavitt, Live on America Now. By sunrise, multiple Democratic caucus members were quietly distancing themselves from Crockett. Her usual allies, who once stood proudly beside her on cable news and protest stages, were suddenly unavailable for comment. Even Representative Ayanna Pressley issued a carefully worded statement. While everyone deserves due process, any public official must be held accountable if credible evidence of misconduct surfaces. Behind closed doors, the Congressional Ethics Committee had already started reviewing the documents presented by Karoline. And the shock was spreading fast. According to one source, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson had a brief but intense meeting with leadership staff requesting immediate investigation into any misuse of public trust or campaign funds by members of Congress. Meanwhile, Karoline was making the rounds. That same morning, she appeared on Fox and Friends, Newsmax, and a segment with Megyn Kelly, calmly walking through the timeline of Crockett's financial trail like a prosecutor with a bulletproof case. "It's not about scoring political points," she repeated. "It's about defending the American taxpayer. It's about telling the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable." Back in Texas, things weren't looking much better for Jasmine. Her local constituents, many of whom had supported her rise from civil rights attorney to congresswoman, were flooding her district office with questions. Emails, phone calls, and Facebook messages demanded transparency. One local Dallas radio host, usually sympathetic to Democratic voices, didn't hold back on his morning broadcast. You can't claim to be for the people while living like royalty off campaign donations. If those documents are real, and they sure look real, you've lost the moral high ground. Period. Protests began to form outside Crockett's Dallas office. Small at first, just a few dozen retirees and young activists, but they were organized and loud, holding signs like, "Where's our money, Jasmine? District 30 deserves better. Not above the law." The most shocking part? Some of the protesters were former campaign volunteers who had once knocked on doors for her. By noon, things escalated. A DOJ whistleblower leaked that there had been a quiet inquiry into Blue Wave Strategies LLC for months. The same firm Karoline linked to Crockett on live TV. The FBI had allegedly flagged unusual financial transactions, but until now, no one had the political will to push it into the open. Karoline's televised takedown changed all that. By late afternoon, CNN and MSNBC, who had largely ignored the controversy at first, were forced to cover it. Their tone was cautious but curious. CNN's midday anchor noted, "Whether you agree with her politics or not, Leavitt's presentation was meticulous. If this evidence holds, it will be nearly impossible for Representative Crockett to walk away unscathed." And still, no public response from Jasmine Crockett. Not a press conference. Not a tweet. Not even a generic Instagram story. Political analysts began to speculate. Was she lawyered up? Negotiating with investigators? Or simply waiting for the storm to pass? But Karoline had anticipated the silence. That evening, in a press briefing outside the White House, flanked by reporters and cameras, she delivered one more blow. "If Congresswoman Crockett thinks this will blow over," she said sternly, "she's mistaken. The people of Texas deserve answers. The American people deserve justice. And I will not let this issue die in the shadows." Then, without another word, she turned and walked back into the White House. It was a Wednesday morning when the showdown moved from the media studios to the marble floors of the Capitol. C-SPAN cameras were rolling as the House Ethics Committee gathered for a special closed-door session, with one subject dominating the agenda: Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The evidence Karoline Leavitt had exposed had forced their hand. The committee couldn't ignore what the public was now calling the Crockett corruption crisis. Outside the hearing room, reporters swarmed like bees. Is Jasmine Crockett going to testify today? Has the DOJ contacted her office? Does the White House plan to pursue criminal charges? Karoline, now a familiar face on both political and mainstream news, stepped before the podium once again, poised, professional, and on the offense. "I've done my part. The receipts are in the public domain. It's up to Congress, the DOJ, and the people of Texas to decide what comes next. But let's make one thing clear: no one is above the law, not even those who shout the loudest about justice while enriching themselves behind closed doors." Inside the chamber, Democrats were split. Some were visibly furious, more at the exposure than the wrongdoing. Others, particularly those up for re-election in purple districts, were panicking. "How bad is it?" one congresswoman whispered to her chief of staff. "If even half of this is true, she's toast," he replied. "And we might get dragged down with her." Meanwhile, Crockett finally emerged. Flanked by a tight circle of aides dressed in an all-black pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, she walked briskly toward the press line. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She didn't even blink. Inside the chamber, Democrats were split. Some were visibly furious, more at the exposure than the wrongdoing. Others, particularly those up for re-election in purple districts, were panicking. "How bad is it?" one congresswoman whispered to her chief of staff. "If even half of this is true, she's toast," he replied. "And we might get dragged down with her." Meanwhile, Crockett finally emerged. Flanked by a tight circle of aides dressed in an all-black pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, she walked briskly toward the press line. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She didn't even blink. She stepped up to the microphones and delivered what was supposed to be a powerful statement but fell painfully flat. "These accusations are a distraction, pure and simple. We've got a Supreme Court under siege, rising costs across America, and Republicans trying to dismantle progress. And yet somehow I'm the target. Why? Because I'm a black woman who speaks her mind? I see through the smear tactics. So should you." A few cheers scattered among activists in the crowd, but most in the media pen just stared unmoved. When asked if she would submit to a financial audit of her campaign, she dodged. When asked if she would release her full travel and expense logs, she claimed it was already public, which, by Karoline's documents, clearly wasn't the case. Back in the West Wing, Karoline was meeting with a team of advisors. One aide handed her a folder. "Internal polling," he said. "Since the segment aired, voter confidence in congressional accountability is up 15%. And your personal approval has surged by double digits." Karoline took the folder but hardly reacted. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about setting a new standard. If we let people like Jasmine Crockett continue unchecked, we send the message that the swamp is alive and thriving. That's not the America President Trump is building." Her phone buzzed. A text from a conservative watchdog group lit up the screen. "We're moving forward. DOJ inquiry is real. Crockett's days are numbered." By Friday, the story had exploded into full scandal mode. Several Democratic donors began pulling back support from Crockett's re-election campaign. Her ActBlue page was temporarily disabled for security review, and whispers of a primary challenger began to grow louder. CNN anchor Jake Tapper even commented during a panel. "It's rare to see a press secretary not only deliver talking points, but deliver facts so well documented that they shift the national conversation. That's what Karoline Leavitt has done." Even her critics had to admit, Karoline had brought the receipts, and the political world would never be the same. By the following Monday, Capitol Hill felt like it was holding its breath. The fallout from Karoline Leavitt's televised expose had gone from headline scandal to political reckoning. Jasmine Crockett, once seen as a rising Democratic firebrand with a fierce voice and a loyal base, was now navigating political quicksand, and she was sinking fast. Congress was buzzing about one thing: the incoming subpoena. The House Ethics Committee, now under immense public pressure and bipartisan scrutiny, officially issued a formal request for Representative Crockett to produce full financial records, campaign expense documents, and travel logs. While worded diplomatically, the message was clear: transparency or consequences. Even more damning, the Department of Justice confirmed an active investigation. Attorney General Pam Bondi, flanked by U.S. attorneys and DOJ officials, held a brief and icy press conference outside the department's headquarters. The American people expect integrity from every elected official, regardless of party. When evidence of potential financial mismanagement or abuse of office is made public, it is our duty to act. We are reviewing the material in question, and further updates will be provided when appropriate. Reporters pressed her. "Is this because of Karoline Leavitt's public release?" Bondi didn't flinch. "We don't act based on television. We act based on facts. And those facts are now under review." That afternoon, Karoline Leavitt stepped up to the White House press room podium, the American flag behind her, and the nation watching again. Reporters had been itching to question her, some to challenge her, others to praise her, all to hear what she'd say next. Karoline opened with calm precision. "The president supports all efforts to root out corruption in Congress. We believe transparency is not optional, it's the foundation of public service." She paused and looked up from her prepared remarks. "This isn't about partisanship. I'm not here because Jasmine Crockett is a Democrat. I'm here because she's an elected official who used her power for personal gain, who betrayed the very people she claimed to fight for. And the facts back that up." A CNN reporter interjected, "Ms. Leavitt, Crockett just issued a statement claiming you fabricated some of the documents. How do you respond?" Karoline didn't flinch. "Every document I shared has been cross-verified by independent financial auditors. If Representative Crockett wants to dispute the authenticity, she's free to take it to court. I'll be waiting there with the truth and witnesses." A low murmur swept through the room. She wasn't just defending her position, she was doubling down with iron resolve. Hours later, Jasmine Crockett took to the airwaves for one final attempt to salvage her image. She appeared on a primetime MSNBC special interview. The lighting was soft. The interviewer was sympathetic. The questions were mild. But even with the friendliest framing, her responses rang hollow. "I made some mistakes," she admitted. "But none of them were criminal. People are making this into a witch hunt because I'm loud and unapologetic." The interviewer asked gently, "So the wire transfers from donor accounts to the private luxury firm, what was that?" Crockett stuttered, "Those were consulting reimbursements. Normal stuff. Every campaign does that." Social media erupted within minutes. #normal stuff began trending, with memes of politicians handing Gucci bags to donors and saying, "It's just consulting." Karoline quote tweeted the clip with a simple phrase. She finally spoke and admitted everything. Within a week, Jasmine Crockett stepped down from 2 committee positions. Her office was cooperating with investigators. And rumors began swirling that she wouldn't seek re-election. In contrast, Karoline Leavitt emerged more powerful than ever. Not just as a press secretary, but as a political force, a symbol of the Trump administration's new messaging machine, fast, fearless, and brutally factual. Conservative media hailed her as a rising star. Fox News featured her in a special report titled, "The Woman Who Took Down a Congresswoman." Even some liberal commentators begrudgingly admitted that Karoline's performance had been devastatingly effective. President Trump himself praised her during a rally in Ohio. Karoline Leavitt is doing an incredible job. You saw what she did to that Crockett character, boom. She brought the facts, not the fake news. That's the kind of leadership we need in Washington. Weeks later, as Jasmine Crockett faded from headlines and prepared for a long legal battle, Karoline Leavitt continued to stand tall behind the podium, more respected, more feared, and more influential than ever before. And across America, everyday citizens, whether Republican or Democrat, began asking harder questions of their own elected officials. Not because of a scandal, but because one woman dared to bring the truth into the light and didn't back down.